Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for my JRDA Statsbook Decoded presentation. My name is officially Mel. I'm a Level 2 non-skating official and the current JRDA Stats Committee Chair. Before I get too far, I have to go through a disclaimer. All information in this presentation is not endorsed by any other organization. In order to remain consistent with the information provided by the JRDA, some text and examples have been pulled directly from the JRDA documents. However, no organization, including but not limited to the JRDA, is responsible for the content or accuracy of the content in this presentation. The information presented here is current as of today's date, and all opinions are strictly my own. Today, I'm going to cover the IGRF with standard and JRDA specific fields, the required rubrics for passing sanctioning submissions for the score paperwork, penalties paperwork, and lineups paperwork, and we'll go over the pre-submission checklist. First off, to find the JRDA Statsbook Manual, go to Games, Score and Stats Reporting, scroll down until you reach the JRDA Statsbook and the JRDA Statsbook Manual. The JRDA requires a link to your Google Sheet for your game, not an Excel file. If you submit an Excel file, it will be bounced back. Using the correct naming convention, make a copy of the file you got from the JRDA onto your own personal drive. To name your file, you're going to use stats-year-month-date underscore division, which would be O for open, F for female, or M for male, underscore first roller derby league underscore the underscore second roller derby league. The first tab we'll go over is the IGRF. We'll cover what information is required to pass the JRDA sanctioned Statsbook submission process. You want to make sure to include the date, the league name, and the team name. You'll also need to indicate which team skated in which color jersey. One skates in color, the other team must be in white. You will want to include the entire charter, not just the game charter, in alphanumeric order. You will then add an asterisk after the number of the skater or skaters who did not gear up or skate in your event. You will also need to note which track layout was used, whether it is the full track or the alternate track. Use the drop-down to mark which division, O for open, F for female, or M for male. You will need to note if there is a forfeit. If there is not, you obviously mark no. If there is, mark yes in that section 1 using the drop-down. Forfeit notes are required. Make sure to pay extra attention in the game results data. This information is auto-populated through a formula for score and penalties. They are pulled directly from other sheets in your IGRF. Do not manually change this information or it will be bounced back. If you need to make changes to your score, make sure to use the separate OS Offset tab. We'll go through details about the OS Offset tab later in the presentation. Note if changes are made to the score and briefly why they are changed, whether it's something like addition error or miscommunication with the scoreboard operator. It's also helpful to note any discrepancies in the additional information section of the Statsbook submission form when you submit your Statsbook. One of the JRDA specific items is for sudden scoring. Make sure to mark if sudden scoring was triggered. There is a drop-down for yes or no. Another JRDA specific field is to note the timeouts and official reviews. These are manually entered in Section 2. Also in Section 2 is any information pertaining to any expulsions or suspensions that happened in your game. When entering an expulsion, make sure to note if a suspension is recommended by using the yes or no dropdown. For participant verification, enter the legal names, not just the Derby names, of each team's head coach and each of the head officials. You will also enter the rest of the officials' names and the roles they played in the games. When you enter the head officials' names in Section 4, make sure they are clearly identified as the legal names in Section 3. Otherwise, the Stats Committee may have to contact you to clarify. For the rest of the coaches, you will need to enter their legal names and their email addresses. Reminder for JRDA, no more than 4 coaches are allowed for each team. This includes the turn coach. JRDA also requires chaperones. Enter the legal name and the location of where they are seated for each team. Now we're going to talk about the scorekeeping paperwork and what's required to pass sanctioning requirements for Statsbook submissions. The JRDA Statsbook includes a drop-down that ties into the IGRF for both the scorekeeper and the JAMRF. These must be filled in staffed positions, and there will be a different pair for each period. If you are manually typing in your jammers, cross-check your jammer numbers. If they are not listed, the cell turns bright red. I mentioned manual data entry just in case you aren't using the data downloaded from the CRG. The same goes for StarPass data entry. StarPasses must be marked for both teams, and there must be equal rows. For example, in Jam 3, if you have a StarPass for the blue roller derby team, you must have an equivalent SP asterisk for the red roller derby team. If you happen to have an offset, do not manually make these score adjustments on the Score tab. Use the OS Offset tab if there are discrepancies. This tab is different from the WFTDA one, so make sure to make your notes in the appropriate jam. Note what the discrepancy is and why the discrepancy happened. The discrepancy reason can match what you put on the IGRF tab. Now we can move on to the Penalties tab. First things first, if you used PLT paperwork, do not use the PLT paperwork tab to enter the remaining data. Just use the Penalties tab. Manually type the penalty tracker or trackers for both periods. If there are 2, enter both officials. For example, officially Mel / Candied Bacon. The RDA also has a section for marking team timeouts and official reviews. For the team timeout, mark the number of timeouts with an X. The shading for period 2 appears automatically. For official reviews, there is a drop-down to note whether there were no official reviews used, an official review was lost, or an official review was retained. Now the rest of the notation is as usual, with the penalty code on top and the jam underneath. One of the things the Stats Committee sees often is incorrect markings for foul-outs and expulsions. For a foul-out, mark the letters F-O in the dark pink column with the jam number underneath. For an expulsion, you will put the penalty code for the expulsion over the jam number. For non-skater expulsions, enter the non-skater's name and the penalty code over the jam number. This is located on the bottom of the sheet underneath the jammer numbers for each corresponding team. Now we can move on to the lineup section. Once again, you will not use the PLT paperwork tab to enter remaining data. You will use the lineups tab. There are drop-down menus for the lineup trackers that correspond with the lineup trackers entered in the IGRF tab. Officials must be filled in for all staffed positions. Watch for formulas. Do not manually override the jam and jammer columns. These are pulled directly from the score sheet. If edits need to be made to these columns, please refer to the Score tab. Double-check the entered player numbers. If the number is not listed on the IGRF, the cell will turn bright red. As in any Statsbook, whether WFTDA or the JRDA, there is no data listed in an SP asterisk line for that team. Data recorded for the team with the star pass is entered as usual. A player who has fouled out or has been expelled should not appear after the corresponding penalty. This is especially important because this is a sanctioning violation. Please double check your data. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the pre-submission checklist that was created by the JRDA Games Department. This is a helpful reference for you as you fill out your Statsbook. It can be located in the Statsbook Manual, Appendix A. It can be also located on the JRDA website under Games, Score and Stats Reporting with a hyperlink to Appendix A. Thanks for checking out this presentation. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any further questions, feel free to email me, officially Mel, or the current Stats Chair at statschair@juniorrollerderby.org.